Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Creativity, Innovation and Quality Management webinar number 2, the Progress webinar. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure why, because I thought I'd recorded it on Teams, but the recording didn't actually publish on the Teams website. So whether it's a technical error or whether it's the fault of the user, that's i.e. me, I'm not sure. But what I'm doing, I'm recording this so as to recreate the session. And I'll also try and tackle some of the questions that were raised by those in attendance. What we did on the day was that, first of all, we had some reflections on the workshop and the process improvement project. As you can see from where the module units are listed there, I wanted to pick up where we are now, and particularly to see what follow-up had occurred within the groups, within your teams, in terms of coming up with ideas, perhaps coming to a finalised map, and any recommendations and presentation of your ideas for improvement within your workplace. But the main focus of the webinar was to move on to talk about the assignments that you have to undertake. And I focused particularly on the practice-based assignment, the 80% portion of the module, and we looked at both the report format version, which is one option, and then the second option of doing the poster. And then we ended the session by looking at questions and any other business. So in terms of reflections on the workshop and where you are with your process improvement project, essentially where we got to was in the workshop, you came with your current state map, and we spent the time analysing your process and the quality problems therein using a minimum of 3 methods or tools of your choice. Some of you use more than 3 tools, that was absolutely fine, but the workshop concentrated on this. So what I wanted to do in the webinar was to get you thinking about the practical application of your project and its findings within your own workplace. So what we did, what I was asking you to do beyond the workshop was to identify some of the different improvement options and to attempt to analyse and prioritise these, and then think about developing the future state process map and providing any justified recommendations for improvements. And if any of you have actually gone so far as to communicate that to those people who had helped you with your project, or to the ultimate decision makers who will take any decision on implementing changes that you might bring about. Now, this is very much in the spirit of providing something back to your organisations from the module that you've been studying, but also this can of course be incorporated in your practice-based assignment. Now, I don't want a long description of this, but what I'm thinking of here is that it probably makes sense, whether you're doing the report or whether you're doing the poster, to simply have your current state map somewhere, your future state process map somewhere, an identification of the methods that you're using, and perhaps some indication as to the recommendations for improvement, and also perhaps a little bit of commentary, even just a short paragraph communicating that to the decision makers and the client. That sort of helps to set the context and the scene. Although, as I say, that's of course not the main focus of the assignment, but it will be useful to have there. Okay, so what we talked about in the seminar, there weren't many people in live attendance, 5 or 6 people, but I was asking, where are you up to? And some of the people reported back for their projects about where their project was up to, and thinking about whether the project has been useful or is potentially useful for your organisation. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say on that. It's just making sure that there isn't just a hiatus after the workshop, that there was some value coming out of your project, and that even if there are only small changes and improvements, that those might have been recommended and communicated to those people who can put those changes into effect. The main part of the seminar focused on the practice-based assignment, and what I've done for the following few slides is literally lifted it word for word from what's in your module guide. And you will see in the module guide, the last 2 pages, that it gives you the briefing for the individual practice-based assignment. And also, you'll find on the back page the information for the reflective diary. So I'm going to focus, and the workshop focused on practice-based assignment, and whether you're choosing to do either the report or the poster version, these were the general guidelines or the general questions that were being asked of you. I'm not going to read it word for word, but it's a critical analysis and report on your own team-based improvement exercise, and I want you to write it from your own individual perspective. I want you to identify and report upon the use of 3 creative tools that were adopted and used by your team and how effective these were. Now, some of the groups, and the question was raised in the webinar, some of you use more than 3 tools, just to sort of try 3, 4, 5, 6 different tools, see which ones worked, which ones you liked. And the question has already been put to me several times: does everybody in our team have to use the same tools and techniques, creative tools and techniques? And I said no. As individuals, you can choose to focus on different tools and techniques as long as you did use them within the workshop time. Okay, so that's the focus of what you're doing. Let's say that's where your report or your poster, where the majority of the word or the space on the poster is taken up, is on that core question. Okay, so I think with all assignments, the first big piece of advice, I always give this to people, is make sure you read the question and make sure you answer the question, because so many times people go off at tangents, study different areas or write about other areas. And in fact, I'm going to be assessing your report or your poster primarily upon your critical analysis and report on the use of those 3 creative tools. Now, of course, I don't just want you to describe or do a superficial analysis. It would be nice if you could set the report or the poster within a broader context of the theory that we covered. So we covered units 1, 2, and 3. Unit 1 was about creative problem solving in business. Unit 2 was about innovation and the theory of innovation. And Unit 3, we had sessions on each of these 3 units in the workshop, was around the area of quality and improvement. So as well as just describing and talking about the creative tools, it would be nice if you could set it within, in fact it would boost your marks if you could set it within this more theoretical, wider context based upon research, theory, principles, and so on. And as I've said, you can respond to the above question by either writing your report or your poster. So let's first of all have a look at the report. Okay, so the report, it's 3,000 words plus or minus 10%. I know that there's been some discussion on previous module assignments in the MBA program and people wondering if they can write more words and so on. So I think the position, well, I know the position at the moment, certainly from my perspective, is that ideally I want it to be 3,000 words. And in fact, I think that there's quality in conciseness, that there's no extra points and advantage in writing more words if you can sort of write it in a shorter number of words. So ideally, I'm looking for 3,000 words. If you absolutely feel you cannot get it down to 3,000 or 3,000 plus or minus 10, I will accept up to 4,000. But obviously, there's no advantage. I really want to stress that, because people have come back to me again saying, am I going to be penalized if I don't write the extra 1,000 words? No, of course you're not. In fact, just the opposite. Being nice and concise is what I'm looking for. The assignment should be in a report format, so an executive summary up front, and then an introduction to like a contents page, running through an introduction. Then you have the main body, perhaps made up of a number of sections, perhaps one for each of the tools you're looking at. You probably want to report upon the process improvement exercise. You might want to put the as-is map somewhere up front. You might want to put the to-be map or the proposed map and the recommendations in somewhere, but these should be very short and can probably be represented in something like obviously a map, a diagram, or even in bullet pointed format. Okay. References and citations in Harvard style goes without saying. We want to see it in the usual academic style as used in business schools. A maximum number of 2 pages of appendices. I'm saying that because a small number of people very often believe that they can chalk it up with 20, 30, 40 pages of appendices. I really want to restrict you to 2 pages of appendices, only to be added if absolutely needed. Best, if possible, to avoid them. Again, I prefer to have it incorporated in the main report. Some of you might say, well, if we've got maps, they've got to go into the appendices. Well, no, they haven't. Just place them within the main body of the report as a figure and put them close to where you're referring to them. But I do realise that sometimes there may be additional things that people want to add later. And clearly it goes without saying, the last point there, that the report has to be presented very competently, has to be concise, coherent, well written, convincingly argued, and articulate, well written. The sort of thing that we expect, of course, from a senior manager. Okay, so as I say, those are listed on the rubric. I stick absolutely to the specification, to the assignment, so there's nothing new there, but sometimes it needs a bit of explanation. Remember that I have circulated the marking criteria that I'll be using. It's what we often call the marking rubric. And you can see the criteria listed down the left-hand side in the darker coloured print. This is for the individual report. I hasten to add, it is different for the poster. So for the report, looking for clarity and articulation of argument, evidence of understanding and analysis. I'll be rewarding the research that you might do, presentation and appearance of the report, and then sources and references, both evidence of sources and references, and also whether they're in line with the guidelines and standards of the Harvard system. Now, the other columns are showing you essentially what the characteristics are of an assignment in each of the bands of marking. Now, these bands of marking are what we call the Keele generic marking scheme, which is for level 7. So it matches in exactly with the university's prescribed bands of marking. So less than 20, 20 to 39, 40 to 49 as a marginal fail, the pass 50 to 59, merit 60 to 69, and distinction level 70% and above. I'm not going to run through every single item there. I think I said to you before when I presented it, what you should really be concentrating on is the right-hand column. Because when people ask me, well, what makes a good assignment, what makes a good report for this particular report, I say, well, read the right-hand column. So if you read through those, you will see what you should be aspiring to. When I mark your assignment, you will also receive a copy of this table back within the electronic marking and the communication of that, because we can add these to your feedback, and I'll give you a profile. I'll sort of indicate for each of the marking criteria where I believe your report was positioned. Okay, so it helps you to identify areas where your report was relatively weaker and where you might be able to make some improvements. I do apologise if I'm clearing my throat a little bit. I've seemed to have developed a small cold, but it's not too bad at all. I think I shall survive. Okay, now the second format is the poster, and it's been quite surprising that more of you have gone for the poster, which is great because it's looking towards a different sort of assignment and presenting your ideas in a different way. But I want to dispel the myth that this is the easy way out, because obviously we will see from the undergraduate posters that I showed you that the standard at level 7 for a good poster are quite high, in fact. But don't let that put you off, because it is good fun to produce the poster. So the poster, the option there is to produce an A1 size poster, and that's going to be physically displayed and examined orally in a 15-minute interactive session. So it's not a presentation. You literally turn up, and I'll explain what we're going to be doing in a minute or two. You turn up at the appointed point, have your poster on display, and then myself plus potentially more people will actually be asking you questions which you respond to. So it's not a presentation. You have to respond to questions asked about your poster. There's no word limit, it's just the size constraints of the poster. And of course, remember, it must be readable from at least 2 meters away. And I have put on the KLE pages some of the guidelines that were provided by QDIS, which used to be the Keele printing service, sadly no longer. But there are some guidelines and top tips for doing your posters. And I know there's a number of you have shared ideas on what makes a good poster. So the poster itself must provide clear and articulate reasoning. What I want somewhere on the poster is a clear conclusion, identifying the key points, or if you like, the take-home messages from all of your analysis and reflections. If you want to put references in, I suggest that some of you will. What I suggest on the poster is, rather than having a long list of references in large font size, I'm going to restrict it to 8 and suggest you can use a much smaller size font for this, much smaller size text. So you might want to use, for example, a font size of 12 just for those references, just in a small box, perhaps in a corner of the poster. Remember that you can't add in flaps to your poster or extra area to it, or different levels or windows to open. This has all been tried in the past. It has to be 2D on the poster. And a top tip clearly is, with a poster, make effective use of graphs, diagrams, pictures, and so on to enhance your presentation. Remember, it's hard copy, so you're not doing animation. Even though many of you will be using PowerPoint to produce it, it's not an animated presentation. So it has to be displayed in that way. Now, one thing that some of you have asked is, how do we submit the poster? Well, the instructions are actually given on the submission pages and so on. But for both the report and the poster, I want you to submit that in the normal way that you would submit an assignment. That is through the KLE Turnitin based system. And with your poster, submit it as a PDF file. Okay, so submit it as you would do an essay, but in PDF format. Now, clearly, the session where the interactive session where we review your poster and talk it through will occur sometime after that presentation. It probably won't be until the middle of April. Mainly because we have an Easter break, because I'm on my holidays then, and so on. So what I'm suggesting is submit the PDF file. You can sort out the physical printing of the poster later on. As long as you've submitted the PDF file, that's absolutely fine. Clearly, once you've submitted the PDF file, you can't make changes after that. Okay, so submit the PDF, but you can then worry about getting your poster printed at some later stage if you need to. Okay, so again, for the poster, there's marking rubric that are there. Of course, these are very similar to the one for the report, because in terms of the content, The clarity and articulation of argument, understanding and analysis, and research content, it's pretty much the same. It's just that you're delivering it in a different format. The one that's particularly different is the visual impact and design quality, the fourth criteria in the left-hand column. So we'll be looking at the extent to which the poster is clearly and professionally presented and engages the viewers or the browser's attention. And clearly sources and references, again, looking for the consistency with the Harvard system and the quality of the sources you're using. But of course, remember, there is that limit of 8 key references, because I don't want the poster to be filled up with a reference list. Okay, again, look at the right-hand column if you want to see what really makes an excellent poster. Okay, now what happened from there was that a number of questions were asked, and we stayed in discussion during the webinar. So questions were taken and addressed, and I think what I'm going to do now is pick up on some of those questions. So if I just pause the recording, I should be able to just consult with the questions that are up on the discussion list from the meeting, because clearly those were recorded, and then I'll put together some responses verbally for you. So first of all, I'm going to pick up on some of the comments that were made during the webinar and posted as chat items. Clearly with some of these, it's just questions about, can you hear me? You're not coming through very clear, and so on, all the usual blips that you tend to get with a webinar. But let's try and pick up some of the points that are actually listed down there. Okay, so if we have a look at these, if I can just open it correctly. I'm still here, don't worry. Right, okay. There was a question about the cost for printing the posters. As I say, unfortunately, our printing office, which was called QDIS within Keele, closed in January, which is a real pain to me, because obviously I used to send all my students to the guy who was the print manager there, who used to be extremely helpful in guiding them, and we used to be able to get a standard cost out of them. Obviously there are some alternative printing places, and in the seminar we talked a little bit about the fact that Keele Student Union do have printing services, and in fact I know that they were buying a new piece of kit for poster printing, particularly knowing that QDIS were no longer going to be offering that service. But there are also some outside bodies which have been listed on the Keele websites and so on, and also a number of you have sort of suggested this. It might be a very good function of Teams for further discussion amongst yourselves about where you might get the poster printed and who might do a good job. Just to give you a guideline, at Keele we used to get a rate of about £15 per poster to be printed. That's good quality printing out of Keele. It would have cost a bit more if we'd have had individual posters done, but you can often get it done cheaper than that. But just be a little bit careful of some printers. Go to somewhere where somebody has used them before, but I think as a group you should be able to find a source for printing that A1 poster. Okay. Yes, in terms of Sue as well asked the question about thinking about scheduling this in, I indicated just previously that what I suggest you do is submit the poster as PDF format, but clearly when we have the session, when we all get together, when I get together with you to do the interactive session, asking questions and for us to talk through your poster and browse it, just get the poster ready for then. Okay, so you don't have to submit the hard copy of the printed poster, you just have to turn up at the time prescribed when we will be reviewing the posters. And as I've suggested, this won't be until at least the middle of April because of the Easter break holidays and so on and so forth. Now, we did have a bit of a discussion because I was unsure how many people are doing the posters, how many people are doing the reports. Until I have a clearer idea on how many posters are being presented, I haven't decided on the exact timetabling of these sessions. Clearly, if it's a situation where most of you have done these posters, we might want to organise a number of the reviews together, almost like an event at your own organisation, or at Keele with you all attending. Alternatively, clearly, if there's just one or two, it will be an individual booking. So we'll wait and see what's submitted by the end of this month, and then I will follow up and make arrangements with you. So don't worry too much about that at the moment. Just make sure that your poster is submitted electronically on the date, or by the date that's suggested. I think it's the 27th of March from memory. I'll check that. If I'm wrong, it's exactly what we agreed before. Okay, there was some discussion about whether the process maps should be presented. I think it's a good idea to present those maps, the as is, and if you've got so far as presenting a to be or a proposed map, that's a good idea. But I really don't want a long description of the whole process and what you've done. Just the maps would be enough, probably introduced as figures, or maybe these might be your two appendix items just fitting onto sheets of A4. Okay, so clearly it is a good idea to show those, but you really don't have to. I certainly don't want you to be talking through the process. I want you to be using the huge majority of the words in the report or the space on the poster for actually talking through the three tools that you're looking at. Okay, so and it would be nice to have a nod to your recommendations and perhaps a short 3 or 4 sentence paragraph about how it was communicated and received as well. So I think within the report you can sort of use up 200, 300, 400 words to sort of cover things like recommendations and the communication and so on to decision makers. And also in the poster, there's nothing at all wrong with having a small box somewhere which is just highlighting those factors. Okay, I'm just sort of looking back through it's quite a difficult thing to scroll up and down through this. Yes, the question about scheduling the posters are there. I'm still scrolling through on my other screen just to see. I think that's pretty much it. As I say, what I would suggest is that those of you who attended, if I have missed anything, or if there are any further questions, please just add it to the Teams workspace, and I'll get a response to your questions and sort of try and answer each other's questions as well. I shall clarify if there's a sort of misleading response within there. I do reiterate that because of industrial action, I actually shouldn't be doing this recording now because I am on technically on strike, but I was aware of the difficulty with the recording not being produced. So my apologies, but this week I am on strike action, so it won't be until next Monday where I will be able to engage with answering questions and discussions on Teams. But I hope that doing this recording has helped to put right the fact that the original recording, for whatever reason, or the original webinar for whatever reason, wasn't recorded. So my apologies for that. Obviously, you know, that I couldn't find any way of actually retrieving what I thought I had recorded on the day. But I do hope that what I've just presented and provided will act in its place. Okay, thank you very much then, and goodbye.